Bloodee Jacob here.
Hey, what's up you guys? Bloodee Jacob here.
Jacob here, meeting my icon, Catherine Isabel, Daniel Lorenzo.
Wait, what did you say?
Daniel Lorenzo.
Okay.
Have a good one.
You guys better subscribe and watch my friend on his YouTube channel. He is kicking ass.
Hey, what's up you guys? Bloodee Jacob here to bring you another video. This time we're going to be talking about and ranking my favorite films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe so far. Now, obviously, there are a lot of films to choose from, and this is all a matter of personal preference, what I've enjoyed the most myself, and obviously not taking into account what may come later, and you know, maybe it'll shift, you know, maybe some movies will change order over time. You know, I was debating about 5 minutes ago on some of them. So, you know, it's still kind of tentative, I suppose, minus maybe the top few or so. But yeah, I'm not going to try to make this video last too long, but I did want to give each one of them a moment to discuss. And I'll be honest, I haven't seen Ant-Man and the Wasp yet. As far as that goes, I can't say exactly because you know, I haven't seen it, but I'd imagine it'd probably rank around right where you'll see the first Ant-Man is. So yeah. Also, I should mention Venom because I really enjoyed Venom, but it's not a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, unfortunately. But for me, I honestly really liked it, so it'd be fairly high up. But yeah, so why don't we get right into it? You're not going to see the smoke too much, maybe. Planning on just focusing on some of the pictures here, but we'll see how it goes. Alright, now my personal least favorite film in the MCU, I debated about this one a bit, but for now, is Iron Man 3. And I know this seems kind of like a generic choice to go with, and I was debating about it. It's not a terrible film. It does have moments. I like when Tony's stuck in the town, sort of back to square one, and he sort of has that dynamic with a kid. But I just found the villain and antagonist in this film to be just very, not just forgettable, but I don't know, just something is really off about that villain, and there wasn't much to him. I wasn't afraid of him, and this plays like a very flamboyant type of character, and I didn't really feel invested in that at all. And some of the Pepper Pot stuff they pulled at the end felt a little bit shoehorned as well, and it felt a little bit forced for me. But yeah, next up is Iron Man 2. And this film, again, I do like a little bit more than the third one. I don't really have like a huge problem with it. It isn't, again, terrible. But I remember when I was watching the first couple times, I just wasn't that into it. I felt a bit bored. I remember falling asleep at one point, but that's probably not entirely the movie's fault, because I'm known to kind of stay up late, so I was probably just tired as well. But Mickey Rourke, I feel like, was wasted in this movie, and not a whole lot was done with Whiplash. It is the first appearance of Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow, but I don't know, just not a whole lot, again, memorable here. We do have Don Cheadle appearing as a War Machine for the first time after being recasted. But yeah. And next up is going to be Ant-Man. Now, I did like Ant-Man. I thought it was alright. And that's what these next few movies kind of are to me. They're alright or just fine. But yeah, you know, I think Scott Lang, you know, he was played pretty well by Paul Rudd. I think the casting was fine. I really like the choice for Hank Pym as well. It's also nice to see Corey Stoll in here as a Yellow Jacket, because I loved his work on The Strain. But he's just playing a pretty straight-up villain here. You find out he was sort of a protege of Hank Pym's at one point as well. I feel like they didn't play on that dynamic enough, and instead they made him into more of just like this greedy villain. But there are some fun and very different action sequences here for an MCU film that I did enjoy. But besides that, all this felt sort of alright and sort of by the numbers for these kinds of films at that point. Now next up, some people are going to be a bit pissed, and I did have this movie lower at one point. I might move it again, I'm not entirely sure. I haven't watched it since the first time in theaters. But next one for me is going to be Black Panther. And now don't kill me, I don't think it's a bad movie. But personally, I just don't like it as much as most people seem to. It does have its positives. I think Chadwick Boseman does a fine job as T'Challa. I think Denai Guerrera is a real highlight of this movie. She did a great job. It's great to see her on this, after being such a big fan of hers on The Walking Dead. But I think there's a lot of faults with this movie that people tend to ignore for one reason or another. I was very displeased with the main climactic fight between T'Challa and Killmonger. It just turned into a CGI fest. The backgrounds look really fake and everything. I did like their fight earlier, sort of on the waterfalls, and I liked everything there. And I don't really buy into Killmonger being as this great villain that some people do either. Thanos blows him out of the water. Michael B. Jordan does an alright job, but I think Ulysses Claw would have been a more interesting villain, perhaps. I don't know. It's kind of lacking in that department, and I just think there's faults with this movie that people tend to brush under the rug. But yeah, so I feel like I have to give this another watch, though, but it's fine. I'm okay with it. I just don't think it's this masterpiece that some people hail it to be. And number 15, I believe, my numbering may be off here, but number 15 for me is the first Guardians of the Galaxy. This one was a surprise, for sure, because this is one of the films that sort of set the precedent for all comic book movies or studios to take more risks with really more unknown or at least lesser known characters, especially to general audiences. And this one worked a hell of a lot better than it really had any right to, honestly. But the cast chemistry was really on point right off the bat. Really good casting as itself as well. I also like the adult Groot in this, as I've gotten a little bit tired of the baby and sort of teenage Groot in the films as of late. Batista, perfect as Drax, and Zoe Saldana. Rocket Raccoon, probably a personal favorite, and Chris Pratt good is sort of that slightly more idiotic Han Solo type of character. But then the film does have weaknesses, though. Not all the humor works quite as well as they want it to, although most of the time it's pretty good. And the main issue I have is probably the villain, Lee Pace's Ronan the Accuser. Not bad in theory, not bad on paper, but again, not really much to him at all. And that's one of the MCU's problems. There aren't a lot of really layered villains. They're all pretty much one note, minus like Thanos, Loki, and maybe one or two others. And I was, the whole dance-off, at the conclusion of the movie instead of a real fight. Again, they're trying to trick him and everything, lure him into something, but it was just kind of, but I also enjoyed John C. Reilly in this movie as well, so there's that. As well as Michael Rooker as Yondu, who we'll talk more about later for sure. But yeah, next up for me is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. I know this is still some people's favorite Marvel Cinematic Universe film, and I get its credibility. I mean, it does play more like a spy espionage, or at least more like a spy action movie. So if you're into that kind of genre, I see why you might like this one more than some of the others. Maybe if you're not as big on some of the other superhero movies, this might be more of your cup of tea. So I get that point as well. And of course, Chris Evans is as fine as ever as Steve Rogers. Scarlett Johansson arguably even more on point here as Black Widow than ever. Although I'm not like huge on her character either, honestly. But what really worked for this movie, though, was obviously a dynamic between Steve and Bucky, who had just returned as the Winter Soldier. I think that relationship worked a lot here, and I really love the final fight, especially, and how it concludes. With Bucky sort of dragging him onto the shore and everything, and kind of left on that ambiguous anti-hero kind of note with him maybe remembering everything. It was also fun to see Nick Fury a little bit more involved than usual. Not personally a favorite of mine, but I definitely, again, give it some merit. So, yeah. Winter Soldier is number 14. Again, if I have things numbered correctly on the Word document here. Number 13 is the very first, the start of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the first Iron Man film, starring Robert Downey Jr. You also have Jeff Bridges in there, Gwyneth Paltrow, Lawrence Gilliard, before he got recasted. To this day, it's still a very solid comic book film, and if this movie, you have to give it a lot of credit, because if this movie didn't work, we'd never get anything else on this list. And I really like the story they told with Tony here, especially with him and with the terrorist group and everything in the cave, building that sort of makeshift bulkier suit. You just see how smart and resourceful Tony really is. Just stripped away with everything, even still. Maybe the villain, Jeff Bridges, he gives a fine performance, but villain maybe isn't that great. Ironmonger. The final fight is fine. But I at least like that he was tied to his past in a way. They made a little bit of effort with that. He's not just some random character out of nowhere that just wants to take over the world or something, So it's kind of in that middle ground, I suppose. But yeah, again, this movie just gets a lot of credit for being the start of it and working as well as it did for the future of the franchise. So next up is Spider-Man: Homecoming. This is another one that a lot of people seem to be over the moon about. I'm not quite there, although I have warmed up to it a little bit more lately. I just wish there wasn't quite as much concentration on Iron Man in this movie, and that we've seen more of Peter's motivation individually. But I think Tom Holland did a really nice job in this role. I'm excited for Far From Home next year. He embodies Peter Parker pretty well, and I honestly wish he got more sort of serious spotlight in this movie. Because the best thing in the movie is when he's actually pulling himself out of the rubble on top of him, and you really see his heart. But again, I wish they concentrated less on Tony motivating him and more on what made him him. Because Spider-Man separately is arguably a greater hero than any of them. So I feel like there should have been more emphasis on that. But the humor in this is pretty good for the most part. A lot of people also love Michael Keaton's Vulture. I think he's fine. I think he's pretty good. Definitely better than the other villains I've talked about so far. Minus Winter Soldier, if you call him a villain. Zendaya as possibly Mary Jane or whatever, I thought was okay. We'll see what they do with that. But there are a couple pretty good action sequences in this. I love the boat rescue and everything. And I wish there was a little more to the final fight, but nonetheless it worked. And so I talk more about it, but I don't want to go on for an hour. I'm trying to get better at cutting these types of videos down. And now next up, number 11, I believe, is one that people are going to be pissed about. But number 11 for me is Thor: The Dark World. I've always liked this movie for the most part. The Thor films are probably my favorite franchise, honestly. There's Cap, Iron Man, and there's Thor. The trilogies, right? It's probably driven by because I really like Thor as a character, and Chris Hemsworth really sold me on the character. I wasn't as into him just from the comics. But we'll talk more about that when we get to another film on this list. This film isn't flawless, and it does have issues. You have Malekath as the villain, who isn't great, but I found him at least more interesting to watch than some of the other more forgettable villains I've already talked about. So I think there are worse out there. The Thor and Loki dynamic here is pretty strong, as well as sort of the full circle dynamic with him and Odin. I really enjoyed. And the Loki fake out thing, it's kind of cheap, I suppose, but it wasn't that late into the film series, so I feel like it was fine for what it was at that point. Natalie Portman, I thought she did a fine job, but this is when you really felt like she was, sort of losing any place she sort of had in these films. She didn't fully feel necessary. I did appreciate that most of this film was another world as opposed to Earth all the time. At least the main scenes, anyway. I enjoyed Thor's scenes with Lady Sif. I wish they had played on that more later instead of her just disappearing because of scheduling conflicts. My favorite scene is probably a scene they share, just sort of sitting around and talking. It's pretty nice. So yeah, number 10 is going to be Captain America: The First Avenger. Some people question me putting this one above The Winter Soldier, but for me, I just enjoy it. I like the period, I like the setting of it, during World War II. This is a favorite of my girlfriend's as well. I don't think Hugo Weaving gets enough credit for his performance as the Red Skull. I'm glad that I'm glad what we've seen lately in Infinity War. That's tied back to this film. It's a pretty nice payoff that we didn't really think they were going to go on again. Of course, we have Agent Carter here, who is fine in this movie. The start of the Bucky Barnes story. And along with Iron Man, if this movie that wasn't the success that it was, along with Thor as well, who knows what would have became of this franchise as well. So it really worked in a bigger way than I think most were still ready for. And so it's just great to see Chris Evans sort of embody this character in his journey, sort of natural transition into being this hero. So yeah, I still enjoy this movie a lot. And number 9, I believe, is Captain America: Civil War. Now is this just a straight up Captain America movie? Not really. They probably could have just called it Civil War or Avengers Civil War or something like that. Although, Thor and Hulk aren't involved, so maybe not. They could have just called it Civil War. Silver. What am I saying? Civil War. Excuse me. But yeah, my girlfriend has a popcorn bucket to this. So I like this film. It's the first film we see of Tom Holland's Spider-Man, who I think arguably has a better showing in this than he does in all of Homecoming, ironically. But I really enjoyed the strain dynamic between Steve and Tony here. It really made you question who to root for. You sort of understood both sides. I honestly felt for Iron Man a lot of the time, but then, of course, you gotta root for Cap, right? And also, this is a really good start for Chadwick Boseman's Black Panther, who I really liked all the scenes in this movie, and sort of how he decided to intervene and not intervene by the end of the film with Baron Zemo, who I thought was a more realistic villain than I was ready for. And of course the airport scene is kind of what most people remember from this movie, and it is a lot of fun with Ant-Man in there and everything like that. But again, I don't think people talk about just the great back and forth between Robert Downey and Chris Evans in this movie. So yeah, next up is Avengers Age of Ultron. I debated on this film a little bit. I might be willing to put Civil War and First Avenger ahead of it. But I could go back and forth on a lot of these all night. So for now, though, it is right here, Avengers Age of Ultron. Now, I really like the Ultron stories in the comics. I even like the Young Avengers animated movie they did or whatever. So I was eager to see how they'd handle the Ultron story here. It almost feels like it could have been a two-part thing like they did with Thanos. And James Spader is a pretty good choice for the voice of him. Although I don't really care for it, they sort of gave him an Iron Man, Tony Stark type of personality. If only they had introduced Ant-Man already, then they could have tied it more to Hank Pym. but it is what it is. You also have the Hulk and Hulkbuster fight in this movie, which I thought was pretty entertaining. And I really like the moment where Hulk comes up from the rubble and Tony is only able to knock him out because Hulk sort of calms down because he's sad of all the destruction he's caused and sort of like the, scaring of the people and everything. So I thought that was a good moment. Thor's visions were kind of interesting. It's unfortunate that Ragnarok didn't exactly go that way. I also felt like Thor could have played a bigger part here than they let him. But still, I thought it was a pretty good movie. Black Widow as well. So yeah, again, I could talk about all these films for quite a while longer, but I'm trying to cut it down to like 25-30 minutes here at most. So next up for me is another couple I've debated between here, but I'm going with Thor Ragnarok. Now I just complained about Thor Ragnarok a little bit a second ago. Sometimes I felt like the humor was a bit too much in this movie. It came in at the wrong times here and there, but there were some genuinely funny aspects to it as well. I really like Thor and Loki's dynamic here, and it really led in well to, or it was really a good step into what we see in Infinity War. I don't mind Hulk's part in this. I feel like he was played for laughs, maybe a bit too much, and he could have done a little bit more in the film. But I really like Cate Blanchett as Hela. I think she's actually a really memorable villain. I kind of wish they would explore her history and sort of ties to Odin and everything even more than they did. I almost wish for her to return in some way as well. This film would probably be even higher, but again, the humor sort of cuts into dramatic moments that I should have left alone, especially with Odin's last scene here. I felt like it would have been a moment that hit me more because of how much I love the Thor MCU character, but they sort of just cut it short, it felt like. You also have Jeff Goldblum as the Grand Master, who I thought was okay. Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie I thought was alright as well. But I love when Thor gets this boost of power note. You see Odin in his vision saying he's stronger than he ever was. So yeah, there is some really good moments here, and some really good action sequences for sure. So I still really liked it. Next up, I have Incredible Hulk 2008. This one never gets talked about anymore. You had Iron Man, you had this, you had Thor, you had Cap, but no one really goes back to this one. That's probably partly because Edward Norton is playing Bruce Banner here. We have Mark Ruffalo now. I think Edward Norton did a fine job in this movie, and I probably would have preferred them to just keep him. But since I have Mark Ruffalo now, I think that he's done a fine job as well, and I hear Edward Norton isn't exactly easy to work with all the time. So I get it, whatever it is. But I still think this movie itself is pretty good. And it's one of the only spotlights we have for Hulk. I feel like he should have gotten more solo movies by now. I know it's difficult with the studios. But Hulk is one of my all-time favorite comic book characters besides Batman and Punisher, so I kind of gotta take what I can get. And like I said, I still think this is a pretty solid movie. I guess Abomination's design is debatable, but I really like his final fight with Hulk in Harlem at the end of the film. It's one of my favorites in the whole franchise. Liv Tyler gives a pretty good performance, and although I do prefer Sam Elliott's General Ross, I think William Hurt did a good job here as well. And of course the iconic after credit scene of Tony Stark, Robert Downey appearing to General Ross in the bar. It was a great, sad to say, oh wait, they're actually doing this, holy shit. But yeah, so I think this film doesn't quite get enough credit. And now we're into the final four here, the top four. And number 4 is going to be Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I don't know why this movie doesn't get more love. I honestly thought the humor, it was even funnier than the first one for me. It had better, more memorable action sequences to me. And it has all this humor, yet it has one of the most character-driven scenes of the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe with how things go with Michael Rooker's Yondu, who I think has a great character payoff in this. It's very touching, and it really did get to me as well. So I don't know why. You had Kurt Russell's Ego in this, who is alright. and once in a while I feel like Chris Pratt's a bit off when he goes dramatic. But still, I like how it concluded with them, even the Pac-Man thing, yes. And Gamora and Nebula here as well was pretty good. Batista and Mantis, I thought was actually a pretty nice duo as well. Especially when she sees how he really feels and everything. But yeah, just because of the really good humor and the Yondu thing I can actually really get into, I feel like it should be spotlighted a lot more than it is, and I really, really like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. So yeah, we're into the top 3 now, my favorite Marvel Cinematic Universe films. And this one people are going to question a lot. I'm sure you've been wondering why I haven't brought it up already. But that is Thor from 2011. I do have a soft spot for the first Thor film. I don't know, I just always liked it, I mentioned Iron Man, I mentioned the first Cap movie, first Avenger, Hulk. But this movie is one that really surprised me, and it really sold me on just how good these films could be, honestly. Because I might have mentioned a little bit before that I wasn't, I knew of Thor, I was fine with him in the comics, but, he wasn't necessarily a favorite of mine at all, really. But Chris Hemsworth's portrayal in this movie and his performance I found very likable and enduring. I got more into the story than I ever thought I would. Yeah, there's arguably too much time spent on Earth here, but Asgard looks great, and there's still some really funny stuff that goes on Earth with Thor and the Pop-Tarts and the coffee. This drink, I like it. Another! Natalie Portman's actually pretty good here as well. It's when her character still sort of felt fresh and like she had a place and everything. Anthony Hopkins as Odin, just perfect casting. Tom Hiddleston as well. I really like the Frost Giant scenes as well. And I thought the final fight was pretty good as well. And I like also the Thor versus Destroyer armor thing in the small town, and Thor really showing that Odin that he's worthy of the hammer of Mjolnir. I probably just butchered the name as well, ironically. Brother, whatever I have done that has led you to do this, I am truly sorry. When he's walking down the road and everything, it's a pretty good scene. And then when you see that he's worthy and he pretty much dies, but then the hammer flies to him. It's an epic scene when he catches it and just goes back into Thor mode. It's great. It's still the most iconic scene to me in the whole universe. So yeah, you also have Jeremy Renner, I think his first appearance here as Hawkeye, which is alright. I like actually the Thor being held scenes as well. And the guy who plays Eric as well did a pretty good job too. So yeah, and now my favorite two Marvel Cinematic Universe films, which it's obvious which two they are at this point, it just depends on the order. But number 2 is going to be the first Avengers from 2012. Still a major success. Arguably, maybe still the best theater experience I've had. I just remember how into it and interactive the crowd was, clapping, cheering, and everything, and it was actually appropriate. You really got into it. Hulk had some really great stuff, and spotlights in this as well, as Thor and Loki's strained relationship being highlighted. Everyone gets their moment in this movie, and it's just a great sort of free-for-all sequence throughout the city, just really enjoyable and engaging. Just the chemistry with everyone was so on point. Felt like a great starting point to something really special, and it was. So yeah, now my favorite Marvel Cinematic Universe film, at least until what we see they do with the next Avengers film next year. But this one's going to be hard to top, because my favorite Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, and one of my very favorite comic book movies in general, is Avengers Infinity War. This is just a great film, my favorite film of the year. It felt like a great culmination to all these films we've gotten over the years. Josh Brolin's Thanos, easily the best film we've ever gotten in a Marvel movie. Honestly, along with Heath Ledger's Joker for me, I put him right there. Different types of characters, but he was this great, powerful threat. You felt intimidated by him. You felt like there was danger. But at the same time, he was layered, and you kind of see his perspectives a couple times, and somehow you still feel for him with the whole Gamora thing. Even though obviously he makes the wrong decisions, but still, you know, they made it more complex and layered than pretty much any other film had with anyone. Like I said, just a real sense of danger here, and just really high stakes, and you felt it. It felt real as well, you know, or as real as, you know, these movies could, really. And Loki's death, I thought, was a great full circle story for him and Thor. Loki actually, after everything, still not really willing to let Thanos kill his brother, and sort of giving himself over, you know. I thought it was a great payoff. Really emotional with him and Chris Hemsworth. And Chris Hemsworth is just awesome in this movie as Thor. Really great story for the character as well. Like I said in Ragnarok, a little bit too much humor, but they dialed it back a bit in this and grounded him again with what he went through emotionally. What more could he lose, right? Just some really touching stuff. The fight with Iron Man, Spidey, and, you know, the others against Thanos on Titan was great. The final fight in Wakanda was epic. You know, we should have gone for the head, right? I love this movie. Just Thor's power and payoff and everything with Peter Dinklage's appearance in the axe, Stormbreaker. I feel like Hulk was regulated a little bit in this movie more than he should have been. I feel like they never emphasize like Hulk getting stronger with anger in these films at all. Now, I'm not saying Hulk should have been able to beat Thanos, but I don't know, I feel like it was a mistake for Hulk not to come out of the Hulkbuster later, because there were actually toys made of it, so I don't know why they wouldn't have included that. So I feel like Hulk's been held back a lot in these films, but still overall a great, great film. I think it's easily the best. It still has, you know, some good touches of humor as well, but really felt the weight of everything, and I think it really, really succeeded, and it deserves all the success it's had. So yeah, that's my ranking, my favorites of the Marvel Cinematic Universe so far. Let me know what yours are. Respect my opinion and I'll respect yours. We don't have to attack each other just for movie orders. But yeah, let me know what you guys thought. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, like, subscribe. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.